What's the craziest reason you had to fire someone? When I worked in hotels, I was promoted to front desk manager. My first task was to hire someone. I ended up getting this very charismatic guy that was a little over the top but overall seemed like a solid employee. After I end up hiring him, and on his first day he asked me if it's okay if he carries his gun on him, and I think that's strange, but it is his right, and the owners honestly didn't care so long as he had his license. He was never able to produce a license, so he was never able to bring this handgun on the property. About a week into his employment, we find out that he's been calling guests, specifically the really attractive females, and asking them if they need any overnight service. We were very understaffed, and my boss decided that instead of firing him, we were going to take him off the desk and put him on basic groundsman duties. Part of these duties included driving the shuttle to the airport and back, and also filling up the shuttle when it got low on fuel, which means that he had access to the gas card. Our accountant confronts me one day about some very strange charges to the gas card. Apparently we had been filling up the shuttle near daily at anywhere between $20 to $45. We looked into it and got the surveillance footage from the gas station, and it turns out was this kid filling up his friends' cars and even his own car. When confronted, he tells my boss that I said it was okay. Obviously that wasn't true, and they didn't believe him. He ended up also being my first termination. One of the other employees Googled his name and found out he was a child predator. He was in a sexual relationship with a 12-year-old girl when he was 26. I also found out that day that we did not actually do background checks, we just said we did and assumed anyone with a history wouldn't bother applying. Had to fire a guy for coming to work high on meth and getting lost in a closet while painting it. Asked what the deal was and was told, "Shush, I am having a conversation." That was his last day LMAO. I worked retail, and we had an employee that would hide and take naps inside racks of clothes. Somehow that wasn't the reason we fired her. We fired her for stealing clothes and then wearing them to work. Fired a guy for looking to pay someone to cast black magic on the owner and the owner's family to bewitch them into giving him a raise, and, ironically, never firing him. Only reason I found out was because he asked someone else in the office for help in finding a witch doctor to cast the spells, and word got round. No one wanted to be in the same room as him after that. When I confronted him, he said the devil made him do it, so it wasn't his fault. I live in the Middle East. I definitely did not wake up expecting to fire someone for black magic that day. Fired a high schooler because his girlfriend kept showing up and they would disappear behind the racks. I told him his girlfriend was banned trying to not fire him, and she kept sneaking back. Worked in an office and they hired a girl from a temp agency to help me. She wouldn't do anything unless I walked her through each step after telling her she had to do it. "Hey, an estimate just arrived on the fax right next to you, complete the quote and send it back." Come to find out, she was playing Spider and Solitaire on her computer. She was also sneaking out back, and the warehouse guys thought she was doing drugs. I told my boss get rid of her, I would rather work alone than babysit her, so he called the temp agency and told them to stop sending her. She showed up the next day, so boss sent her home and called the agency saying, "Hey, she is useless, stop sending her." She showed up again the next day. This went on for over a week. The people at the temp agency said they told her to stop showing, but she kept coming in every morning, mind you usually 10 to 20 minutes late. My boss wouldn't say anything to her face, so finally I said, "Hey, we can't afford to pay you, so we had to let you go through the temp agency. They should have told you." She was all, "Oh, I thought they were joking." I was so glad she was gone. I work at an art studio where we teach classes and sell pottery that our artists make for others to paint. I'm one of the artists and the manager. I started getting a funny feeling about one of my employees. She wasn't doing anything blatantly wrong, just seemed to work really slowly sometimes, request insignificant but kinda odd schedule changes, and have different break habits from the other staff. I started feeling like she was stealing, but this is a really small business, so I didn't have her on camera or any way to really prove it. Until she accidentally sent me a video of herself painting pieces that I made from her home. Not my personal experience, but one fellow contractor had a safety guy for 6 months. One weekend he took a trip out of town for non-work related reasons, but used the company truck, and charged it all on the company credit card. On his way up there he ran a random person off the road, who just so happened to be one of the owners of another contractor who works closely with the one who employed this guy. Shortly after he was fired, and I'm sure criminal charges were being brought against him. A couple weeks later his wife calls his former employer saying he had called her randomly and killed himself in his truck on the side of the highway. Me and another colleague went searching for records of this guy, couldn't find anything, no claims of a suicide in the local paper where he supposedly killed himself at. Thought it was weird, but whatever. It turns out this guy falsified all his qualifications and job experience. Fast forward a month later, and I heard through the grapevine that the original contractor who had employed this guy received a call from some contractor across country because he applied for work there and put them down as his previous employer. He faked his own death to get out of trouble with the company, then proceeded to put them down on his resume, not expecting anyone to check his references. Lol. Had an employee that was going to get fired for simply showing up late constantly with no legit reason. During the term meeting she tells me another employee cut the brake lines in her car. It's obvious this was to save her from being fired. She didn't realize that something like that gets cops involved. She was termed, and then detectives showed up to her house to get statements. Of course, no evidence of lines being cut, and now she's dealing with police for making false statements. I was a bartender per bar manager. This guy came in one night and said he was an aspiring DJ and asked if we would consider hiring him to come in just on Sunday nights to DJ for us. He said we wouldn't have to pay him at first, he would just take tips and we could renegotiate after he helped to build up our Sunday night crowd. He lasted less than 3 months. He drove away so much business and I got so many complaints. He played the same songs every week, and when people made requests for commonly known songs, he had no idea who the musicians, were. I had to fire someone who was working for free. Not too crazy. More stupid than crazy. One of the programmers on my team was sitting at his desk looking at porn. And this is cubicle land. No officers. My director walked into the area to talk to me and saw it. Then it was the first thing he told me about, so I got up and walked over for a look myself, and there it was. Me and the director looked at each and I said, I gotta take care of this. So we walked back to HR, I told them what was going on and what we saw, and they told me to fire him. So I did. He was living in his own fantasy world in his head. He apparently owned 5 supercars, a street bike, was recently dating a model. He even had a tattoo of like lipstick from a kiss on his neck. Apparently his supermodel girlfriend kissed his neck, then his world-famous tattoo artist friend tattooed it. The tattoo was also huge. Like way bigger than any lips on any person I've seen. I've yet to find the She-Hulk supermodel girlfriend of his on the internet. He apparently owned a PS4. In 2012. He knew a guy who designed it apparently, but wasn't allowed to show anyone. Oh, and after we found out he was a pedophile, we discovered he owed child support in Texas and had a warrant.